All right, here we are with another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Sal, how you doing this morning?
Wonderful morning.
Hey, you just got back from vacation. How'd it go?
Oh, we had a blast.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Where'd you go?
Oh, we went to the redneck capital of the world. We went to Gatlinburg.
Nice.
Actually, I don't guess we stopped at Pigeon Forge.
Okay. You didn't travel on in to the motherland?
I'm not really sure where the border, where the boundaries are, but we got awful close. But it was a fall break.
Nice.
And apparently, same week that all of Tennessee goes on fall break.
Saw them all, huh?
Every one of us.
You were a glutton for mutton.
Yeah, we had fun. We had a lot of fun.
Well, good. Did you do the Alpine slides?
No.
Well, then you didn't experience it. Then.
We did, but we left more to do when we go back. I think we're going to go back.
There you go. That's for sure down there. Hey, we have a guest in the house today with our very first in a series, our Farm Legacy series. And this morning, first out of the box, our premiere episode of this series is Aaron Johnson with Riverview Farms. How you doing this morning, Aaron?
I'm excellent, Ryan.
Great.
Appreciate
great.
it.
Well, we're glad you're here. Well, thank you very much for participating in this. And so we've got a series of questions that you've already seen, and we're just going to talk about your operation, your contribution to the world of agriculture in a less than 2% of the population scenario that you're in, and you feed a lot of people. There's no doubt. We'll get into that. So we're going to start you out as we always do with the question of the day. Sal, I'll let you ask it.
Okay. And you've we give him all of what, 2 minutes?
He had all the other questions.
30 seconds anyway.
So you're the guest, Aaron. You get to go first. What is one productivity tool that you could not live without?
You know, we were joking about whether it's a shovel or a pocket knife or a bunch of stuff like that that's non-computer, but we're probably really at a day and age where it's a cell phone.
Yeah, you couldn't be away from that very long, could you?
I mean, well, it's just part of that. You've got constant contact if you need it. You've got access to anything on the internet, so parts, markets. I've seen you get information back and forth, the data sets. You've got your capabilities to carry spreadsheets and use them, access them from anywhere in the world. So that's. I wasn't sure that I'd ever be able to say that, but it has come to that.
Who would have thought? How did we ever get anything done? And then we had bag phones. It was our first cell phones, right?
Yes.
We were big time with the bag phones.
Oh yeah, paying $1.10 a minute to talk to somebody.
You don't want to talk about it. $600 phone bills.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, Ryan, what's your productivity tool? That's a good one.
It was, and I will tell you that I probably got proof on my cell phone of the fact that Aaron and I could call each other for, I don't know, 3 days, 6 times a day, and never talk to each other. Never get a chance to talk to each other. So, yeah, we've had a long stretch of misses for a while, but
A lot of good voicemails.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think mine'd be email. Email, I don't know how I could get by without being able to click that little flag beside those emails and go, one of these days I'll get back to that.
Yeah.
But no, it is handy to know how quickly that we could get information to someone, and at least it's there. If I take care of somebody calls me on the phone, especially if I'm driving, that's gone. That's gone before I stop. So emails are very important. And I think I mentioned in one of our previous episodes that texting, I'm a bigger texter than I am a caller. And I think that's all because of the ability to go back and look again. So that's mine. So what do you have?
Well, mine is kind of along those same lines. You kind of end up there, but I know back in the day when we try to keep your calendar organized, it was a Franklin planner, and you keep all the series, right? You get a 1 year and you finish 1994, and then you get 5 and 6, and pretty soon you had this World Book encyclopedia of all the years of your dates behind. But I think Microsoft Outlook, for me, I put everything in there, and my wife will even send me invites to like practices and stuff like that, and that's kind of how we organize our days. So I guess it's kind of along the same lines.
And I will commend you being one of the most organized people I've ever been around. And your notes that you take when it comes to meetings is unbelievable.
Yeah, I have to write it down. It's kind of selfish. It's not really for everybody else's benefit.
It works.
People think
it
I'm
works
doing
for
a
me
service.
too. It's certainly helpful. What was said in that meeting? I bet Sal got it.
If it wasn't in those notes, it probably wasn't said.
That's true. That is true. All right. Well, let's get to our guests. So, like I said, we want to highlight. We want to start highlighting our members, our customers, and certain local farms. So, Aaron, you're here. Your farm is known as Riverview Farms, and so I guess first question for you is: what year did your farm operation start, and who started it?
Yeah, so it's fortunately my grandfather in his later years of life, to have something to do, wrote a book about his life.
Oh, wow.
Cool. So this one was one of those easy ones. My great-grandfather moved to Orleans the second time in 1920, and we've to what is now the home farm, and we've been there ever since. What we do know is that my great-grandfather migrated from Kentucky up into the Pekin area, Pekin, Indiana, and then moved on over into the Orleans area once, and then went up into northern Indiana for a year, and said it's just too stupid cold up there. And he moved back to Orleans and stayed put.
Well, that is neat.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that was all captured for you. Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent.
So what is so tell us about, I guess, the overall Riverview Farms. Kind of tell us about the farm operation.
Yep. So Riverview Farms today, so 2023, as being a part of actually, Ryan, we're part of the 1% Club.
That's true.
Based on the last census, the agriculture, we're all the 1%ers, whether we make anything or not. So,
the other 1%.
Well, let's wait a second before we get to 2023 and the one. Tell us about whenever you started with the farm.
I started in 1996.
96.
Yep, I graduated from Purdue in the spring of 96. So I will use that as a time of coming back. So, like a lot of people, I grew up actually going to work with my dad starting at somewhere around age 6. And, of course, I probably wasn't very productive, but, I did the favorite jobs of a kid, picking up rocks, and we'd handle. Dad was always on the poultry side, so I handled a lot of chickens as a kid. So, but in '96, Riverview Farms. At that point, we were affair was finished on hogs. We were raising turkeys. We raised pullets at that time. So chickens from birth up to ready to lay eggs. We did not have any layers. I guess. And then we had crops. I mean,
So fair to finish hogs, turkeys.
Some turkeys, pullets. And then raised corn, soybeans. I mean, it's mostly corn, which then fed into the feed mill that we already had at that time.
Yep.
So
well, there has been a bunch of changes in. So kind of now catch
so
us
now,
up.
now 2023, what do you got going on?
Yeah, so 2023. So we still have those. Each of those entities, they're just a lot bigger than they used to be. When it's my dad at one time had figured up what percentage growth we'd had since my cousin joined back to the farm up to a couple years ago, and it's stupid huge. But it's been growth towards what does the market kind of dictate? What's the processor wants to, they wanted a semi-load of hogs at a time. Well, what production size do you have to be on your fair to finish to be able to market by the semi-load? In the layer industry, when I was a kid in young days, an average size flock for Dad was a 10,000 pullet flock,
Which is big.
But that covered 80% of the layer flocks that the people collecting eggs that's the size buildings they had. But then, 10,000 became 50, 50 became 75, 75,000 became 125, to where now, one pullet house is, generally we start 250,000 birds
Wow.
because that's the industry standard. And so if you're going to be in the industry, you got to meet the industry what they need, right? So
That's interesting how you took it back to a semi-load of hogs, right?
Yep.
What do you have to do to be able to provide a semi-load at a time, which is what the processors wanted. They didn't want a pickup load anymore with cattle racks on it.
And that's a tidbit, a nugget of wisdom that our grandfather left with us was you always, if you're going to be in a commodity market, you always have to be the most relevant and the most efficient at it. So, if you're not relevant, you're going to get left behind. So that's kind of been a lot of the push. So, so it's, so we're the fair to finish on the hogs. Layers, we're still raising pullets, more turkeys, added more crop ground, and then right now we're been expanding our layer operation. And in all of that, it takes a lot bigger feed mill than it did when I was a kid. So that was it's just kind of that part of how you keep pushing. I remember in '96 we would go through about maybe 40,000 bushel of corn in a couple months. Now we go through 40,000 bushel of corn in a week.
Explain that latest. I don't know if that's your latest investment, but that's a recent investment. Is that feed mill just around Orleans there? Kind of tell us a little bit about that investment.
Yeah. So it's part of, so Riverview Farms. I mean, we call ourselves a animal protein production farm. Fundamentally, that's what we are, because that is the largest percent of everything that we do. So it's like we've got the crop ground, and when you hate to think that when you're in that 5,000-6,000 acres of crops that's still your smallest part of your farm. That's a large farm in any at any standard on crop production. But that's generally the smallest part of our farm. So, so the feed mill though is one of those that's you make the choice. We had a feed mill that was on life supports. I mean, it was literally held together by duct tape. I think we had an auger that I don't know if there was any metal tubing left. It was just all duct tape. By the time we got done building a new one, but
It quit rusted at that point, though.
In millwright classes, that's probably the first thing they do is show them duct tape removal.
yes,
How to get rid of all the old and put the new in.
Yeah, proficient duct tape removal is correct. Right. But yeah, we were kind of looking ahead and kind of looking at where we thought we would grow. And so the question becomes either you continue to make your feed or you sub it out. It's one of the two. And with one of the things that we always thought was a plus to our livestock production has been that we have control over our feed. I mean, we have direct control over the grind size of the corn. We have the direct control over all the inputs coming in. It's if you're the one's going to write the check for it, you do a pretty good job shopping. So so at the time we were running a feed mill designed by my grandfather back in the 70s. It was running about 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. The employees, and we started to talk to them and said, hey, we're going to build something, hang with us. And they did. And we made it work, but oh man, it wore all of us out.
That last 10 years or however long of
the last 2 years.
The last two
that it took to get built. I mean, we were just, they'd call me at 12 o'clock at night. Hey, we got this auger's broke. I was like, oh gosh, why do I have to be the one in the family that's the millwright specialist? But so I got the phone call, and my wife's like, where are you going? Well, going to work on the feed mill again. So the new mill, it was designed. It's a 60 ton an hour mill. So when we first opened it up, we ran it 8 hours a day, and we could mix all the feed that we needed for the livestock at the time. Now we're up to about 16 hours a day,
Good.
5 days a week. Still pushing, trying to keep that, trying to stay away from the Saturday, Sunday. The tow truck is a lot more expensive that day. The mechanics, if a road call for a truck's that more expensive, and generally speaking, all of us, we live in a society that we would prefer not to work Saturday and Sunday. That's just you know, if your employee base is in that, okay, how do we meet that so we become a place people want to be? So, but yeah, so the feed mills allowed us then to continue the animal growth as it's been presented. So,
Okay. It sounds like that's what that's interesting that you took that part, that critical component of how the diversification of the whole operation, still hogs, layers, and turkeys.
yep.
So still those foundational ones.
So how many diets do you make? Any idea?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's
That's the nice part about dividing and conquering. You know, that's
you're not over that part.
I'm still the one that they're going to call when they need a millwright in the middle of the night to fix something in there. But it's just you know, that's just part of one of those skill sets that I've got that some of my other family members don't. But the nice part of the divide and conquer, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, and it's the same way. You know, with an operation our size, you know, any business as you grow, sometime you have to figure out how to divide and conquer and let responsibilities lie on other people. So, but yeah, it's not, you know, I think in the turkey diets, I think there's 7 in a life cycle. Layers, there's like 3 or 4 different ones just for the layers. Hogs, I don't know.
Wouldn't know with the sows and everything. It'd be a lot.
You know, so it all starts adding up. And so then you think about, you know, a meal that's designed for throughput. So then your bottleneck becomes how fast can you get it out?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's also a downside. You know, when I'm comparing our feed mill to say Far Best, they make 3 diets for the whole turkey life, and then they just blend those 3 diets as they're loading the truck for the life cycle. Well, their feed mills are very efficient.
Sure.
You know, they can set and crank out 200 ton of something.
Is that the feed just for your Riverview farms, or do you sell any? Do you have external customers?
With no external customers, so it's all internal usage.
That's good. You control everything.
Yep. So,
So you've referenced help and being able to delegate and sort of farm that out. So let's jump down to how many family members and other employees, but let's start with family members. How many are in the operation, and how many generations do you currently work with? That's always a really interesting piece of these operations.
So I'm going to start with in '96. My grandfather was a part timer. He'd show up just a couple hours a week when he wanted to, and gripe at us and remind us to keep working. And
The position he earned.
Yeah, he well earned it. He put his time in. But at that time, it was my uncle, my dad, a cousin of mine, and then my older brother was the four family members that I joined. And we had an office. It was about the size of the room that we're in today here. I don't know, 15 by 20 maybe. And we could actually have a employee meeting with all of us in that office.
Communication is not a problem.
It wasn't an issue because there was only, I think there was 12 non-family employees at the time. Today, so there's, my dad has become that part-timer. We keep telling him he should really try full-time retirement, but
I was going to say, does your dad know he's part-time yet?
well,
He may see this.
yeah.
He likely may watch this.
Yeah. Well, see, you'll appreciate this. So he announced that he was going to part-time retirement, and my younger brother, sitting at a table at Christmas dinner, was texting my sister. Both of them are not part of the farm, but they got to laughing, and we're like, okay, finally, we're like, okay, so what are you guys texting? He goes, Well, Sis and I just decided that Dad really sucks at retirement. But Dad said part-time retirement meant that he only worked 40 hours a week instead of 70.
Yeah.
There you go.
But no, we've probably got him down to one day a week.
Good for him.
He comes into the office to bug everybody and get us a cup of coffee more than anything, I think. So, but
It always
today,
tastes better when you don't have to be there.
yeah, yep. So currently, my uncle is he retired and passed on. And so today it's my cousin. He's kind of working toward being a part-time person. He's kind of towards that retirement, getting closer to that retirement age. And so then an older brother and I, and then we've brought in my nephew. So it'll be the next generation is joined this year. So which is a nice. We've got a couple others that we're hoping, a couple other of the next generation we're hoping we can convince to join in. But it's my youngest is 10, so she has a little time. I've got a little time to work on her, still. So, but outside of family, the four main family, we've got another 125 full-time employees at this point. So,
Wow. A lot more than the 12.
You
in
don't have that
96.
meeting in the same room anymore, I guess.
No. It was, I remember that one year we had a Christmas party for the employees and their spouse, and we had it at Mom and Dad's basement a couple years. Well, then that became the Spring Mill State Park, and now we've outgrown the rooms there, and we either go to church or we've even had to. We can go to a church there in Orleans and have half of everybody.
Yeah.
And then that 125 doesn't include all of the contract growers. So like with the hogs, we've gone to kind of a contract model, which helps get the manure spread out, your disease risk and everything. And it's been good for it's good for a lot of people because there's a lot of guys that were 60 years old. They've got lots of good hog barns, but they don't want to be in the farrowing room anymore. And the next generation didn't want to be in a farrowing room either, but they still had good facilities. So, we've been fortunate. We've got really really good people we work with outside of employees too. So which is nice.
Good. What do you think the next 5 years will look like? If you go back to 96 and 12 employees, I know this isn't 30 years ahead, but sometimes even going back 5 years, I go back and look at some of the things we talked about, some of the things we thought were a business risk that maybe never turned out. What do you think 5 years from now with Riverview Farms? What do you think that'll look like?
It's.
So your daughter's 10, 15. No, that's not going to be.
Yeah. It's not even. Yeah, it's to think about if she thinks about coming back to farm. I mean, it's, I'm still 10 years out on that one. So, but no, I really think in that 5 years, when I look around home, the next 5 years is going to be really interesting. Because when I look around in Lawrence County, there's only a handful of us that's under the age of 50 farming. And we've got you got a lot of land that's being farmed by guys that are the historical farm age in that 65, 70-year-old range. So, there's lots of opportunity cropping-wise, I think. That's we'll see. I think there's opportunities. I know. I mean, we're working on several expansion projects as we speak. I mean, it's expanding the layer operation some more. So 5 years out, I expect we'll be looking at either more of everything that we're doing, or who knows? It's like the day Tyson announced that they were going to close the processing plant in Corden. I think every grower for Tyson called us and like, hey, you got anybody? You need anybody to grow turkeys? And it's like, Well, if our best would let us, yes, but you know, that's not happening. But you know, who's to say that somehow, you know, you find the right group to pull something together to repurpose that into something that somehow we can be a partner into. You know, I don't know. But there will continue to be opportunities, and we do not intend to necessarily stop. I mean, it's the business adage, you know, either you're growing or you're dying. And we want Riverview Farms to be one of those, an operation that, whether it's family managed or not, it's big enough to continue to be an entity.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the goal, I think.
Good.
All right, so maybe not just as it pertains to Riverview Farms, but one of the largest obstacles you see in agriculture?
I mean, obviously, agriculture is labor intensive. You know, that's why the egg integrators don't want to raise pullets, because there's lots of labor in that. You know, they want to put birds in a building, be able to have one person check lots of birds, and collect the eggs.
Low labor investment,
Low
time.
labor, yeah. So you know, labor is going to continue to be a problem. I mean, that's Ryan. You and I have talked about the issues that Premier has, even with that issue too. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, and it's not the day where Granddad could turn you loose on a 80 John Deere and go pull a 10-foot disc across the field at 2 mile an hour. That you know, we're turning guys loose with $1 million pieces of equipment, and you know, every time that feed truck rolls over, whether it's my driver's faults or not their faults, you know, it's like every time your heart sinks, like, is the driver okay? And you know, we're just turning people loose with a lot of stuff that, so that's going to be an issue. I mean, the other issue, right, that I see for agriculture going forward is going to be, you know, with us being 1%, if 1% feeds the 99% of this country, that disconnect to what we do is going to become greater and greater. And we already have people that have no idea what a 600-pound sow looks like and or what she's capable of, dictating how you're going to handle it. You know, and I won't say that all their ideas aren't right or, you know, or are wrong. It's just, when I'm handling a 600-pound sow, I'm the one that's got to know how to handle her, not somebody that's halfway across the U.S.
Yeah, they don't understand that while, like you said, while their intent may be admirable, it's not practical in a lot of cases.
Well, and what person, you know, a lot of times I equate our livestock production to raising a kid. You know, Ryan, when you guys had children, you guys probably went to the hospital, and right after the baby was born, I mean, I'm thinking about to mine, you know, they made sure that they were wrapped up and cuddled and had warmer for them to sleep in to keep them warm. You know, made sure that babies started eating well, and so that could continue. Tried to hand us some opportunities, you know, probably the few, at least my first child, you know, it's like, hey, make sure you do this, do that, and hey, and about, you know, here's when you should have the first dirty diaper, and you know, stuff that nobody ever told me before we had a kid.
Yeah, no one ever gave you that warning.
No. But you know, it's like, you know, animal production is just the same. You know, when a sow gives birth to piglets, you know, you make sure you got the heat lamps in there, and you got a heat mat to make sure they stay warm, and you know, it's part of, you know, why we use crates is, you know, to make sure that the sow doesn't, you know, try to minimize the sow actually laying down on her babies and killing them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but it's not any different though for, you know, I read with great disheart every time somebody is sleeping with their child and rolls over on them in the night and kills them. You know, It's just you're that exhausted, you don't know. And I think the salads are the same way,
Yeah, they're just so big.
you know. And so it's kind of that same. So there's a lot of that we probably in ag haven't done a good job of relaying. Like, hey, here's the reasons why we do this.
Yeah.
You know, most people don't realize that when they grab an egg out of an egg carton, they're the first human hand to touch that egg. They don't realize that, you know, it's, you know, when I was a kid and a lot of those 5,000 layer flocks, those were on floor buildings. You never knew whether that egg was 1 day old or 10 days old when they picked it up out of that bedding to capture it. And then we wonder why we had so many issues with salmonella and rotten eggs in a carton, and you know, today
I didn't know that either.
today we don't have that.
I didn't know
You
that
know,
either.
we don't have that because it gets, you know, most of the production systems are designed so that egg comes out, it rolls down onto a belt away from where a bird can defecate on it and crawl on it and climb on it, and you know that it's fresh that day, and usually it's packed within 24 hours of being laid.
It is amazing. Not many kids today have drug a hen off a nest to get the eggs.
Very few,
Nope.
very few.
Not a fun practice.
You know, I mean, you think about our dairy producer brothers. You know, Fair Oaks Dairy up, you know, they aim to have milk from the time it comes off the cow into the market in Atlanta. They intend to have it on a store shelf in 18 hours.
That's amazing.
Gee whiz.
Yeah, especially when there's 6 hours of trucking.
Yeah.
So, you know, agriculture today, the commercial agriculture today is designed towards food safety. You know, I mean, I think about the FDA audits at the feed mill. That's designed for making sure that we keep it clean, keep it healthy and safe for the American consumer.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good lead in. It's what we do today is designed for food safety. Another part of that is what we do that's sustainable. Mm-hmm. And I know personally for some of the conversations we've had, just from some of the new sustainability practices that you've done. So how do you show how you farm? I guess that's the 1%. So how are we going to tell folks that don't have any idea?
yep.
And how do we show how we farm? And how do you show those sustainable practices? First, what are they? And then how do you show them?
And that's right. And we live in that age where we're still in the amount of us in agriculture, crop production, agriculture, the sustainability issues are becoming more and more real. But there's a lot of people that's hesitant to change. So Riverview Farms has been largely no-till. Oh, gosh. I've got one field has not been, was dissed once since 96.
Continuous no-till.
Basically continuous no-till. And it's really rough, and you know, I really got tired of picking up rocks.
I was going to say.
You
You think you got them all till you disc it again, right?
Yeah. But you know, I mean, it's living in an area where there's lots of rock and stuff. I mean, so you're looking for ways to minimize that, but by the same token, I mean, I got tired of erosion. I inherited farms that had no topsoil. The topsoil is already gone. So, and that is becoming more and more the case, even across even some of the prairies. But so we've been no-till of using cover crops to minimize erosion, try to build soil organic matter back. Changed rotations a couple times, but you know, it's had weed in our rotation many years, just to kind of help. It's kind of one of those. It does a better job keeping the ground covered. You put a lot of carbon back. There's things like that. So it's. I wish there was more ways to talk about it, to put it out there, but you know, my goal each of the last 3 years has been to have 100% of everything have cover crop on it.
Good.
So
We've used True Terra. So you're one of the first adopters of True Terra. And internally at Premier Ag, what we think we can do, and we're committed to this, is that being an avenue for you to show how you farm, is to take that True Terra data that shows that, and you mentioned the tillage. You can go by some fields that have cemeteries are in the middle, and you can tell before we started this continuous no-till, you can just see the differences in the field height compared to the fence rows or the cemeteries. But with True Terra, you can show how you farmed.
Yeah, and it was an interesting. I called ADM was pricing some of the wheat this summer, and he's like, "Hey, let me get back to you, because if you can help verify that it was no-till and that you used a cover crop the year before, we've got an end user that will pay extra for your bushels of wheat to be used in their products."
Wow.
So, 5 years ago when some of this conversation started, I was like, "Oh yeah, we'll never get paid for doing what's right." And it's the funny part. It's Rulon family up in Central Indiana. Like, they've done a good job of putting numbers out there of their return on investment that they get from using cover crops and no-till. And I've not done hard numbers, but yields keep going up and soil organic matter keeps going up. Fields that used to be red are now turning brown.
Wow.
Talking
Talking about the soil.
For the soil,
Yeah.
Right.
soil, it's just a visual difference, which is water holding capacity, and which then should be resiliency in the crop, which is a part of what conservation farming is supposed to lead to. But no, it's you mentioned the cemetery. I was kind of, when I was driving across 135, the cemetery over there at the northwest edge of it, it's about 5 feet.
Yep.
That cemetery was used in one of my classes in '94
Really?
to highlight tillage erosion. And that was kind of a light bulb moment, because I'm like, I know where that cemetery's at.
You knew what I was talking about. It's like on sand.
And it's on sand, so
Yep.
it's even worse. But, that professor had stopped and talked to the guys farming that. And yeah, it had about 40 years of tillage. And I would love to say that I don't have the same sort of thing in a couple places at our place, but we've got some places along some fences that you're like, yep, we've eroded a couple feet off of that. So, but yeah, I think it's going forward. I think there's going to be more incentives, more money put out there to help more people. It's still just frustrating that those of us that's been doing it 15, 20 years
Yeah.
are going to get left out. But I think there's many people that's been pushing and going to kind of figure out
There's some
how to help
advocates
that.
for that.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, and right. I mean, it's part of. I mean, climate's been changing for years, and that's what it's being touted around. So we won't discuss whether that or opinions on that one.
You don't want to do that?
My pay grade's probably not high enough to adequately.
That doesn't stop everybody else.
It's
That's not
Right.
a limiter for most folks.
yeah, but our geology data said climate has always been changing on this earth. I mean, that's why we don't have dinosaurs anymore. I mean, we find some really weird stuff down the mud and the dirt and in the rocks. So, so things are going to keep changing in agriculture. I mean, it's kind of back to that. The obstacle. It's going to be, what are those changes? How do we meet that? How do we meet a changing client base? Whether it's correct or not correct, Riverview Farms has to produce products that's going to meet what a consumer wants, or you don't have consumers. For years, all our layers were in cages. Well, you can't sell in the state of California if it's not cage free. So well, okay, so
They probably only buy like 30% of of your product in California and the United States anyway, so they have to be in consideration.
Well, I mean, it is a large market. The largest consumer of eggs in the world is the Chinese military. Second largest is McDonald's.
No way. Really?
Yes. Yep. And so, so when McDonald's said that they were going to start buying cage-free eggs on a consistent basis, now you got to, now you're the world's second largest consumer is telling you what they're going to do. We wasn't too worried about the Chinese military because it doesn't come from the U.S. So I didn't have to worry about that one, right? But McDonald's is a big user.
All of a sudden, number two sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of others made commitments too. So I don't want to downplay all the rest of the markets, but it's just part of. So that's some of those obstacles, right? I mean, and it's people's. How do tastes change? How does, price of beef is scary high. It's like, it really hurts when I go buy steaks to try to feed a family of six, like, we don't do that very often.
We're going to be back in the woods on squirrel season again if this keeps up.
Yeah, real soon. With squirrel gravy to go along with it.
There you go.
Yeah. And that all harkens back to y'all's roots.
I tell you, Kentucky, it doesn't take long. Just a few generations away.
But so there's a lot of this, and then there's what size and scale does a person have to be relevant? I think that's going to be a challenge going forward. Fortunately, several years ago, I had an opportunity to travel with Winfield down to Brazil, and there in the state of Mato Grosso, the soybean capital of the world, stood on the I'm sure I'm going to butcher their name, the Maggie farm, and we were staying at their office out on their farm field office, not the business office, but their field office. The business office was in town, but he said, "You see that little farm on the horizon that you see the grain setup over there? Them and us farm everything that you can see to the horizons in every direction here."
Wow.
Well, that was 2.5 million acres of soybeans that they farmed. The other guys, we went to their farm too, and they only farmed 1.3 million acres, along with 500,000 mama cows.
Gee, Christmas.
Right. So when we think about scale, that was one of those times where you're like, wow, we're kind of small potatoes
You
here.
start figuring up how many counties in Indiana that is. Yeah.
Well, that's all the crop ground from the Ohio River up to Martinsville from east to west.
I was going to say, go south of Indy, just about.
Martinsville.
Wow.
Martinsville South. That was what they were farming. Yeah. And that didn't include their wood ground.
Well, technically in southern
So-
Indiana, the horizon's not very far off. You can see
Right.
sometimes it's 100 yards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the right county, it's not even that far.
Exactly. So, so it's part of that, as we size up, it's like, well, what's the equipment of capabilities and sizes, and where does that meet or not meet? And so, it's kind of starting into that point where typically farms around 5,000 acres, a lot of them quit doing any of their own spraying. Just across the board. That's just kind of a so we're still doing all our own, for the most part, all our own spraying, which makes me a little bit of an oddity. But to me, with no-till and cover crops and trying to go in and plant green first, and then come back if we're going to kill it post planting, that sprayer is pretty critical. To me, and on our crop production, the sprayer piece is as important as that feed mill is to the animal production.
Certainly the timeliness.
It's from a timeliness standpoint, because all of a sudden you're working with, because we always know that the wind never blows, and it never rains Monday through Friday, to where you can spray all day. So, so that's part of it. But there's, with these opportunities moving forward over that next 5 years, if we buy more, if we rent more, if I got neighbors are going out, they're like, hey, we're retirement. We don't have any heirs that want to farm. Are you interested in renting it? Okay. Well, at some point, it doesn't justify the next sprayer, or the employee issue becomes the next issue, that all of a sudden it's like, okay, how do we keep that in the, I guess we're going to call the co-op and start making plans of how to pull stuff together, because it's for us, the co-op Premier has been a wonderful usage. We got to looking back, our first year into a Premier company would have been with the Lawrence County Co-op, and then into the White River system when that merger occurred. I was thinking it was somewhere in 98. I don't know.
I think it was 96. But
Was
I'm
it
not
actually
sure.
96?
I think it was. Yeah. I think. I can't be quoted on that.
Well, I was on
I used to know him.
Yeah, yep. But, so it's been a while, but part of, at that time, White River, Dave Brand became part of the White River system, and we were working together on phosphorus and potash, what we needed in a few fields that we couldn't spread manure on, and all the lime. But, at that time, you think back to 96, spring of 96, I sat in an ag engineering class that was discussing the potential idea of variable rate fertilizer applications.
Oh yeah, that was new.
So, and Brim and I was like, somehow we can make this happen. Well, and I remember, doing the first grid soil sampling, and then kind of making a spread pattern that was based on the spread width and the early options for doing that. I mean, it just, so kind of moving forward, it's like now we write prescription recommendations. Hey, somebody
To 100. Or
Gosh.
one.
It's reinforced for me. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And that, and that's people I rent from, people, the employees, contract growers. I want somebody to be truthful with me. I want somebody to be there when they say they are, or let me know that something's come up and they're running behind. I want to know that yes, there is product, or no, there really isn't going to be product. So let's go with game plan B. And when I've looked at that, and I look at everybody that I'm working with, they're the same. They're those same sort of people. It's they want to be treated well. Just a phone call that says, hey, are you okay? I heard something was up. I went to one person I rent from. Hardest conversation I ever had with somebody I rent from. I'm like, hey, we need to talk. I think your son's addicted to drugs. I didn't know whether I was going to keep renting that farm that day.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, well, as one dad to another, I appreciate that you were concerned enough about my son that you come talk to me.
Yeah, good for you. The easy thing would be to do nothing.
It would have been. The other problem was his son was my employee at the time.
Yeah,
you kind of,
When you're close to somebody, you probably saw him more than his
yes. Yep.
family members did.
Yeah, yeah, and so it was easier to see some of the signs because as we grew employees, I did a lot of that training of how to spot for drug addictions, emotional addictions, even physical abuse, and so that overriding treat others as you want to be treated. I respect the people that's come by and be like, hey, your 16-year-old son, he needs to slow down while he's driving. I'm like, tell me about it. I know, but, I also had to say, he might have got a little bit honestly too. He goes, oh yeah, I remember when you were a kid.
Yeah.
I was talking about his mother, but okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it might have been on both sides, but I'll keep it to me today. But yeah, so that's, and then been coupled that with an eye on the future. In our office, we've got a picture of my grandfather in his, I don't know, probably in the 40s, maybe 50s. He's on a tractor with pulling a 4-row corn planter, and it's a great picture. He's in the tractor seat, but he's looking backwards. And we didn't find that picture until after he passed away. And there's been a lot of days I wanted to ask him, what were you looking back at? Because normally he was one of those guys that was always looking forward. What's the next opportunity? What's coming next? What's it going to be? But then I remember a little bit of what he said. And what he said once was, make sure you look back and know where you came from. So as you're looking forward, you don't forget where you've been.
Yeah. And it sounds like the biggest lessons that you've learned is a lot that ties into the past, is that honesty and integrity. And those things are fundamental with how you run the business today and what you expect out of your suppliers.
Yep. I've got a couple of mechanics come and work on equipment, and I find tools still laying there, and and I'll take them back and I'll be like, hey, I've never stolen a man's tools knowingly. So here's yours back. And, I don't know that I've mistreated anybody knowingly.
Yep.
And that's, that way I sleep well at night. I don't have to hang my head when I'm out in public. I don't have to go hide. Somebody wants to talk to me, I'm always there. I don't have anything I don't think I got any ghost in the closet. If I do, then maybe they should come out and let me know so I can clean it off the slate. But but yeah, it's just part of it. So we'll continue to move forward.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here. That's sharing insight to your operation. Obviously, it's a large, diversified, important piece of Premier's territory, and we thank you for your time. Sal, you have anything else?
I don't. I had a lot more questions, but a lot of interesting topics, and we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, if you really wanted to make this, we could probably make it about 3 hours long if
That's
we
right.
covered them all. But
I think I did feel like that he answered with the climate thing that he was talking about with the loss of dinosaurs. If we hadn't lost the dinosaurs, these guys would have found a way to raise them. It sounds like.
I'm kind of glad some of those things are gone.
I figured you guys.
I think they made a movie
They'd have a
about
barn
that.
full of them somewhere.
yeah, we would have been Jurassic Park for sure.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep, they'd have
Yes,
had a
we
barn
would.
full of them for sure. All right, well, Aaron, thank you so much. Aaron
thank you.
Johnson again from Riverview Farms, and this is another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies.